It all started with a promise of ambition on a scale the world had never really seen before.
But that ambition, it was built on a mountain of debt. And for so many nations, it all came crashing down into disaster.
So what are we talking about here? This is the story of China's Belt and Road Initiative. I mean, this thing was hailed as the project of the century, a plan to literally reshape the world. But now, people are calling it a geopolitical disaster. The big question is, how did this trillion-dollar gamble go so incredibly wrong?
All right, let's go back in time. The year is 2013. China's President Xi Jinping unveils this absolutely breathtaking vision. Imagine a modern-day Silk Road, a massive web of railways, highways, and ports connecting Asia, Africa, and Europe. The pitch was simple, right? Bring development to the world, and in the process, cement China's place as a true global leader. And wow, did the world buy in? The response was just overwhelming. We're talking more than 150 countries. That's a huge chunk of the globe, all signing up, totally eager to be part of this new future. Especially developing nations, right? They saw this as their golden ticket to get the infrastructure they've been dreaming of for decades.
And to make it all happen, China really put its money where its mouth was. A staggering $1.2 trillion. But, and this is the crucial part, you gotta understand this wasn't free money. It wasn't aid. Nope. This was almost all loans. And not just any loans, but often with higher interest rates than you'd get from, say, the IMF. They were lending to countries that Western banks wouldn't touch. And that decision, well, it was gonna have massive consequences down the line.
But you know, beneath all that shiny optimism, people started asking questions. Was this grand vision really just about helping out poorer nations? Or was there something else going on? A kind of secret blueprint, a hidden agenda?
And this really gets to the heart of it. You have to look at what was happening inside China. They were sitting on a colossal surplus of everything. Too much steel, too much cement, and a whole lot of engineers with not enough to do. So, the Belt and Road Initiative. It was the perfect solution. See, China wasn't just building roads for other people. It was building a global supply chain for itself, exporting its own workforce, locking down access to raw materials, and of course, massively expanding its political power.
And all of this led to a really serious accusation, a phrase I'm sure you've heard: debt trap diplomacy. The idea behind it is, well, it's pretty simple and pretty ruthless. You lend a country so much money that there's no way they can realistically ever pay it back. So how does it work? Well, here's the alleged playbook. Step 1, you find a desperate nation and offer them these huge, almost irresistible loans. Step 2, you bake in some hidden conditions like, oh, by the way, you have to use our Chinese construction companies. And then, the final crucial step. When that country inevitably can't pay you back, you seize their most valuable assets. A port, an airport, whatever you want.
And listen, this isn't just some abstract theory. The results have been absolutely devastating. Let's look at some real-world examples of how this dream turned into a total nightmare. Let's start with Sri Lanka. They were promised this glittering new trade hub, like a new Dubai. So they took a $1.3 billion loan from China to build the Hambantota port, even though studies said it was a bad idea. And guess what? In 1 year, only about 30 ships showed up. 30! So, with no money coming in, they couldn't repay the loan. The result? Sri Lanka had to hand over the entire port and all its revenue to China for 99 years.
And it's a similar story over in Africa. In Zambia, the leaders had these big dreams of modernizing their country with Chinese money. But pretty soon, China held 43% of their entire foreign debt. So when the pandemic hit and copper prices tanked, Zambia's economy just collapsed. They defaulted, becoming the very first African nation to do so during that crisis. Okay, this next one is just unbelievable. In the tiny European country of Montenegro, China financed a $1 billion highway. $1 billion! But the project was such a mess that the money ran out after they'd only built 41 kilometers of road. And the best part? It leads absolutely nowhere. It just stops. Meanwhile, the country's debt ballooned to over 80% of its GDP, completely crippling their economy. And you know, it's not always just about the debt. Sometimes it's about shoddy work. Take Ecuador. They built a $2.6 billion dam to solve their energy problems, but the Chinese contractors allegedly cut a lot of corners. Today, there are more than 17,000 cracks in the dam's walls. The whole thing is now at risk of total collapse, which would be a massive environmental and human catastrophe. And then there's Pakistan. The numbers here just tell a brutal story.
The Gwadar port was supposed to be a total game changer for them. But look at how the deal was structured. It's shocking. 91% of all the revenue goes straight to China. That leaves just 9% for Pakistan. All those promised jobs and prosperity, they never showed up. But you can bet the debt did. So after about a decade of stories just like these, the world started to wise up. You started seeing nations canceling projects, trying to renegotiate deals, and really pushing back against what they saw as a trap. A really big turning point came from Italy. Now, Italy was the only member of the G7, the group of the world's richest economies, to actually join the Belt and Road. And then they came out and publicly called it a big mistake and officially pulled out. That was a huge, huge symbolic blow to Beijing's ambitions. And of course, the West saw an opening here. They decided to offer an alternative. The US and Europe launched their own big plans, like the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment. They promised a totally different model, one based on transparency, real partnerships, and sustainable development. It was a direct challenge to China's way of doing things.
So where does that leave us? After a decade and $1 trillion, what's the final verdict? Who really won and who lost in this colossal global gamble?
Well, for China, it's really a mixed bag. On the one hand, mission accomplished in some ways. They got control of, or at least stakes in, over 100 ports around the world. They secured access to vital raw materials, and they definitely strengthened their alliance with Russia. But on the flip side, their global reputation is in tatters. They're stuck with billions in bad loans that might never get paid back. And their own economy is slowing down under all this pressure. So seeing all this backlash, China's trying to pivot. They're rebranding. Now they're talking about BRI 2.0, a version that's supposed to be smaller, smarter, and greener, focusing on things like digital tech and renewable energy. But let's be real, the world is a lot more skeptical this time around. So that leaves us with the ultimate question. Was the Belt and Road Initiative a catastrophic failure? A trillion-dollar mistake that just backfired spectacularly? Or, by locking down all those strategic assets and gaining so much influence around the globe, was it actually China's ultimate victory, just playing the long game? The final chapter on this one? It's still being written.